Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 12 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. You can follow him on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, do I even need to ask how you're doing today?
Awful, terrible, miserable. Philadelphia sports, they've beaten me down, and we're here to talk about 1/3 of that equation, just absolutely beating me down. But you're going to hear just like a lot of negativity from me because there's not much to be positive about from an Eagles standpoint.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And we're going to get into it. We're going to talk Eagles. We're going to talk Week 3 NFL. But before we get there, this podcast is going out live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook. So if you're watching, drop a comment. We'd love to interact with you guys as we go along. This will also be uploaded onto Apple Podcasts later. So please follow, rate, review, subscribe. It really helps us out. And so, Mark, let's just get into it. Last night, Monday Night Football, prime time, the Eagles travel to their hated division rivals, the Dallas Cowboys, and they get embarrassed on national television. Where do you want to start with this one?
I mean, it's just like, what's the positive from that game?
It's over?
Yeah, it really, I mean, the punting, our punter looked really good again.
We do have the GOAT punter, which at least gives us something to look for. Here's a stat I want to lay on you. I tweeted this out last night. The NFL record for the most penalties in a season is 158 penalties by the Chiefs in 1998. 158. The Eagles are currently on track for 198 penalties. They're on pace to beat that record by 40 penalties. Now, I know there's an extra game in there, but still, like, this is just ridiculous. I don't understand how this team can be so undisciplined. I just don't get it. Like, there's something you can control, not having the most talented roster. You can control having new play callers on both sides of the ball. It just blows my mind that we continue week after week to be plagued by these penalties.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one way you can go with it. I mean, just from a broad perspective, it's like Sirianni's play calling was, I mean, some of the worst of any play caller this year across the board. Jalen Hurts had just an absolutely indefensible performance in terms of especially the first half. In the first three quarters, you could even stretch it to. We didn't run the ball whatsoever. So, I mean, Miles Sanders looked pretty good the two times he got the ball, I guess, but couldn't run the ball. I thought Devonta Smith had multiple plays where his size and strength was a serious issue against Trevon Diggs. I think Jalen Reagor will be working either selling cars or like selling insurance instead of getting a second contract with the Eagles. For large portions of the game, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz are completely invisible. The O-line didn't look good. Sayamalu got hurt again, so that's 3/5 of our offensive line gone. I mean, it's just like just saying that's just offense. I haven't even gotten to the other side of the ball where we couldn't stop a nosebleed. But, I mean, there are no positive takeaways, and there's nothing to look at and feel confident going forward, especially when you play both teams that have made the Super Bowl, or both Super Bowl teams from last year in the next 3 weeks, and then the other team that you're playing is 3-0. And then the next team you're playing is also 3-0. So, I mean, it doesn't get much more brutal than where we're sitting right now, especially after where we thought we were sitting after week 1.
Yeah, I said before the game, I tweeted out, I was nervous about the game because, we saw such good things in week 1 from Sirianni, from Hurts. We saw such bad things in week 2. I want to see what we were going to get consistently. And so I had a lot of nervous energy going into this game. What were we going to see? And what we saw was just terrible. Now, there's mitigating circumstances. I mean, what would it be like not to have to play with a different offensive line every week? There's not an Eagles quarterback that can answer that question because this happens to us every year with the injuries. But, Jalen Hurts looked awful. Landon Dickerson looked awful. Jalen Hurts, this is the biggest thing that rubbed me the wrong way. Jalen Hurts getting in Devonta Smith's face after that pick 6. Like, I don't know what that's about, but I know for a fact that Devonta Smith fell down and that ball was still behind him. So it was an awful throw. And it's maybe not a pick six if he doesn't fall down, but it's sure as heck not a completion. But
Yeah.
Hurts has looked bad. Devonta Smith hasn't been good. I mean, we talked about we need to run the ball. Well, that means we're throwing it too much. Well, through 3 games, the receiver you traded up for has 115 receiving yards. And I just don't know how to evaluate this. Like, we talk about, is it Nick Sirianni's play calling? Is his play calling the issue? Or is it that his quarterback can't execute his plays? Is the quarterback the issue? Or is it that the receivers can't get open? Is it the receivers or is it the play? Like, it's this whole circular thing, and we don't know. We don't know if the head coach is good because we don't know if he's got any players that are any good. And it's just this whole circular thing. Like, how do you evaluate a new head coach with an unproven quarterback and wide receivers? And we'll get to the defensive side of the ball in a minute, but how do you evaluate a defensive coordinator when you have not put a safety or a linebacker on this roster in a decade? Like, this roster is fundamentally flawed at every level. It is Howie's fault, and every evaluation is suffering because of it. So I want all those people that were in my mentions after week 1 about how we're too hard on Howie Roseman and defending him. I want you to hop on the show here, hop in the comments section and tell me how it is that we're supposed to evaluate these things with such a terrible roster.
Yeah, there's not much you can take away, and it makes it really hard to evaluate. I mean, I'll even stay away from the pick six. Like, the pick that really drove me crazy was the pick on the first drive. You get such a hot start. You get the big play from Goddard. You get a nice 5-6 yard play from Quez, whatever that was, and then you have him wide open in the end zone. You have a touchdown, and Jalen Reagor doesn't come back in at all, try to fight for the ball, doesn't try to break up the play at all. And it's not pick's not entirely on Reagor or anything, but I mean, he is a lazy player and is not very good at football, but he got open, and that should have been a touchdown. That's an average throw that pretty much most of quarterbacks in football can make from where they were on the field. So,
and just look at the difference on that. I mean, so yeah, he's got a little bit of a step. It'd be a tough throw to get in there, but you can't underthrow that ball, but he does. And what does Reagor do? He makes no attempt to come back and fight for that ball. Just like play that clip and then go watch the Quez Watkins reception in the third quarter where, Hurts bails out of the pocket. He underthrows Watkins by a half a mile. And Watkins, who draws 2 flags on the play, he gets held and he gets defensive pass interference, and he still comes back and makes the catch. Like, Jalen Reagor is out snapping Quez Watkins, and there's no reason for that. Just admit you were wrong on Jalen Reagor. Make him your slot receiver until we can get rid of him. And let's move on. He's not it, but you've got a guy in Quez Watkins who is making strides and looks like he actually belongs on a football field, and he's getting out snapped by Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, there's no explanation. Quez needs to be used a ton more. Devonta needs to be used in ways that fit his skills. Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. And it can't just be said enough. Like, that pick changes the momentum of the game. And I know that we end up, getting a strip sack or whatever you want to call it, a pick in the end zone, and we score right after that. So it's like an arm punt. But the momentum that gave for the offense, they never recovered from that, and they never got going. And then obviously the next drive they get it within their own 5, so you can't judge that. And then the next drive they go 3 and out right away, and then they go 3 and out right again. It's just like you can't have 4 straight drives end in either a back-breaking pick or end in a 3 and out. That's kind of hard to evaluate. There was so many bad throws from Jalen in this game, and I think that I've been as high on Jalen as anyone almost, and I've been as bullish on his talent as anyone. And I honestly, there were a ton of criticism after week 2 against San Fran. I didn't think he played terrible against San Fran. He ended up with 330 yards in this game and 2 touchdowns. I don't care what the numbers say. You watch that game, and he was indefensibly terrible for a really long stretch in that game in a way that I don't think he was against San Fran. Or at least in a way that I thought was more defendable against San Fran, or there were easier explanations as to why he was missing throws or to where the pressure was coming from, or, whatever the issue was. But there were just flat out guys open that he was throwing behind, too low, too high, to the right. just everything. Everything you could say. Missing deep balls, missing short throws. I thought that I'm drawing a blank on the words I want to use right now, of course, because I'm so depressed. But when he pulled it back on a read option, or what looked like a read option to me, where it looked like to me that Miles had a big hole, and he pulled it back, and Micah Parsons tackles him for a 5-yard loss. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's first down. So now you're at 2nd and 15. And then just missed opportunities. Like another Jalen Reagor, who's one of the worst punt returners I've ever seen in my life. He gets I think he caught the ball at the 30 or maybe the 40. He runs backwards for 5 yards, cuts back again, runs back for another 5 yards, gets tackled 10 yards behind where he caught the ball. And because he ran around like an idiot for 10 seconds, we get a holding call. So we end up, instead of like a fair catch, getting the ball at the 40, we get the ball at a touchback, basically. We get the ball at like the 20 or whatever it was exactly. But just like stupid stuff like that. I mean, that factors into the penalty conversations that you said. And there was obviously the clip with Sirianni talking about Barnett, where it's always him. It's just
in his career, Derek Barnett has 23 penalties and he has 19 and a half sacks. He just unbelievable. But so what are you going to do? Because Brandon Graham's hurt. He's out for the year, because who would have ever thought a 33-year-old could get hurt? And your backup plan is Ryan Kerrigan, who the casual fan may not even know plays for this team because he's yet to even make a tackle this season, despite playing 94 snaps. And so what are you going to do? You're going to bench Barnett and roll Kerrigan out there? I mean, this team is just so poorly constructed. It's unbelievable. And so I want to get into the defense a little bit. Well, I don't want to go there yet. I want to talk about Nick Sirianni's game flow, his game plan. I am not you need to run the ball more guy. I defended that. That was a stupid narrative when Doug Peterson was the head coach for a long time. But here's the thing. The Eagles went into a week 2 game against the 49ers, who have a fantastic front seven and no secondary. And they handed the ball to Miles Sanders the same amount in the first 2 plays as they did the entire game against Dallas, who had no defensive linemen on their roster healthy. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And so you can say they were behind. It was a 13-point game at halftime. And with a struggling quarterback, we came out and we went pass, pick 6. It wasn't until that point the game was totally out of reach, and you could have been running the ball. And I just don't understand what Sirianni is trying to do here.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I can't believe we ran the ball twice. I mean, it's just like what can you even say? It's that simple. I mean, that's just such a joke.
Yeah,
it's just embarrassing. I mean, it's just utterly, completely embarrassing to see a team perform with that little heart, and just it's just too. And then what was the game plan? There's no way the game plan was to run the ball twice. Like, how do you get that far from your game plan right away? There's no way you came in saying, let's throw the ball every single play. The first drive, you're not running the ball. Well, like, I just don't understand how that was. I mean, you have an extra day to game plan. It's Monday Night Football, and that's what you came up for. And it's worrisome. The T-shirts, the sayings, the colloquialisms from Sirianni are definitely starting to run thin when he looks like kind of the bumbling idiot I was expecting when the Eagles hired a guy who no one else had interest in interviewing, who had never play called before. I was extremely critical of the hire when it happened. And I mean, I got fooled by week 1 and by funny quotes and press conferences and whatever it was, but maybe we should have hired Joe Brady, who's making Sam Darnold look like a superstar. Maybe we should have hired Bieniemy, who is going to have 10 college jobs and 5 NFL jobs ready for him as soon as he wants, I think. And I mean, there's other options that I'm drawing a blank on, and guys that got hired, other places, but it's brutal. It looks like a terrible hire, and, people are going to yell at us for talking about a rookie coach for his 3rd game. And yesterday I had people on Twitter yelling at me that I was overreacting, saying Jalen Hurts probably isn't the guy. And I've said for a long time that I hope he is, and I was pretty hopeful that he was, but I don't know how you could watch last
I
night's
mean,
performance and tell me I'm wrong to say he's probably not the guy. And I'm also willing to say at the same time, Sirianni's probably not the guy at coach. He's probably not the guy that's going to be here 4 years from now.
Jalen Hurts probably wasn't the guy a year ago. I mean, and I hope he proves us wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing has changed in that evaluation. Like, I came into this season saying he is not the guy unless he proves it. And so far he hasn't proven it. I'm not more down on him now than I was at the start of the year.
I am.
And we came into him we came into him viewing him a little differently too, I think. But, I saw people online, way overreact, it's time to bench him, all this stuff. Like, that's absurd. Like, this year's about evaluating Jalen Hurts. It doesn't matter if he plays this way every week for the rest of the season. He's your guy, because what are you going to learn about Joe Flacco? You're not going to compete for a division with him. Gardner Minshew, we know what he is. He's a fringe starter, good backup. He's not winning you the division. And so if you can't compete for the division, you go find out what Jalen Hurts is. And we need a resounding answer. And if he continues to play like this, we have it. And that's fine. We have the draft ammo to go make a move, but you don't make a move to bench him right now. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this changes in 7-8 weeks with Minshew. Who knows? But yeah, I definitely don't want to bench Jalen Hurts. But someone was like just outright yelling at me saying, "Oh, you're overreacting," and like, way to have courage in your convictions, because I have been a Jalen Hurts guy. But I just think me reacting to what's being plainly in front of me, I'm not just someone who's going to stand on a take, and while it's being proven wrong. And by the way, my take wasn't that Jalen Hurts definitely was the guy. I just probably had a bit more optimism than the average draft evaluator of Hurts, and not before he was an Eagle, just in his draft evaluation. So I had a bit higher of an opinion of his upside, and I still do think there's an upside there. But I'm not just someone who's going to watch a game like last night and defend the indefensible. I mean, that pick six is indefensible. That pick in the end zone to the target to Rager is indefensible. The one where he missed, I think it was Goddard. It might have been Ertz on the first or second drive when he was wide open across the middle, just throwing it right behind him. That's indefensible. It's Nick Sirianni running the ball 3 times is indefensible. I mean, these things are not. You can't just ignore them and say it's a rookie play caller. You can't just ignore them and say, let's not overreact to Jalen Hurts. I'm going to react. And you know what? If Jalen Hurts comes out next week and proves me wrong and says, I'm the guy and stands toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and throws for 400 real yards, not getting blown out and throwing for garbage time yards, and doesn't throw picks and holds on to the ball and competes and loses a close game or wins, then I'll come out and say Jalen Hurts probably is the guy. But I'm going to react to what's put in front of me, and I think the Eagles are probably reacting silently as well. So I don't know. This is terrible. I mean,
I feel like online I almost saw more reaction to the defense than to the offense, more criticism of the defense, and particularly of Jonathan Gannon. And a lot of the rationale was there's veterans on the defensive side of the ball. The offense is so young, you expect those growing pains. But I'm here to tell you right now that if you're blaming Jonathan Gannon for that defensive performance, you're going to have to tell me what you want him to do. And you can tell me what you think about this, Mark, but I've seen a lot of people really critical of Gannon, and I just don't know what you want him to do. You come into the game knowing the Cowboys have a really good passing attack, and so you play 2 safeties high, and you dare him to run the ball. That's what you should be doing, except then your linebackers can't step up and stop the run. And so what do? Well, then we go to single high, and then it's just throwing the ball all over us because we're sitting in soft zone coverage just like Jim Schwartz did. Okay, but when we switch to man coverage, your linebackers can't keep up with the tight ends or the running backs, which is who killed us in the passing game. The receivers really had no impact. So I guess I just don't understand what you want Gannon to do in that situation. He is totally hamstrung by the fact that the Eagles do not have a competent linebacker or safety on their roster. Like, there's not a linebacker on the Eagles team that could be a starter for any of the other 31 teams in the league right now. And I really believe that. And so I don't know what you want him to do. Like, I saw the adjustments he was making, and he just doesn't have the personnel to stop anyone.
I mean, I think it's just as simple to say as, Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a really, really good defense, and the Dallas Cowboys gave them absolute fits. So I guess I came into the game. I didn't expect 41, but really you add 7 from a pick 6 there. So we really gave up 34 points to the Cowboys offense.
Well, we really gave up 41, but thankfully that one official couldn't see that Dak's entire upper body was in the end zone. But that's for a different day.
But that's true. But you just look at. I think the Dallas offense is going to be really good, and I'm not necessarily going to kill the Eagles defense for that game. They were terrible. I mean, they showed no heart. They couldn't tackle. Stupid penalties, getting them down the field. I think Darius Slay and Steven Nelson look terrible in a lot of spots. So I get that there's a lot to do with scheme, and there's a lot to do with the safety help and our safeties being terrible and our linebackers being terrible. But I wasn't overly impressed with their coverage. Darius Slay got lost in the end zone twice. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to blame Gannon. It's an indefensible. I've used that word 50 times on this podcast, so I need to stop using it. But you laid out the scheme reasons as why what we can't do with our personnel. But even just beyond that, it's hard to scheme against Dallas. What do you do to try to stop Zeke or Pollard, whoever's in the game, and they're both have their own unique skill set for that team, and while maintaining the 2 incredible receivers, and while not getting killed by a completely average, unathletic tight end who was wide open the entire night. I've never seen a player as wide open.
They made him look like Travis Kelce. And I've got news. Travis Kelce, the real one's coming to town next week. Justin's chiming in on YouTube with some heart emojis. I'm just going to take that to mean he co-signs every take that we're saying. He knows we're right on the money. So,
yeah, it's right. I'm not freaking out about Devonta. Yeah, this is just a random thought.
Yeah,
because it made it sound like I was really down on him earlier. I obviously am as high on Devonta as anyone, and I think long term he's going to be fantastic.
There were always going to be limitations for his athletic profile. There were. And so we're seeing that. And I am less concerned about him than any other aspect of this team.
Yeah. I agree. And we saw in week 1 that if you scheme it correctly and you use him as a correct part of the offense and you get him the ball where he can make plays, I think that, we've seen him be used correctly. We just needed to get back to that. And maybe that's a Hurts issue. Maybe it's a Sirianni issue. Maybe it's partially a Devonta issue. But I don't have too many doubts there, but I will just say it felt like, there were more plays where his size was an issue than I had ever seen in a singular game at Alabama. And I know that people are going to say, well, that's college, but I used to kind of argue back with people who were coming at me about Smith's size, but with the SEC bodies and the SEC talent. And, maybe I was wrong a little bit, but I also just think it might be an adjustment period, and it might just be something that Smith has to adjust to.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's roll on to the rest of the league. We're going to kind of rapid fire some of these because we got a late start with the Phillies game and all of that. But let's go to Cleveland, where the Chicago Bears were just wholly embarrassed by the Browns. Justin Fields makes his debut as a starter. And I guess you could say he had a little bit of a rough day.
1 net passing yard, 68 passing yards total, and then he took 67 yards worth of sacks on 9 sacks. So that is 1 net passing yard for the Chicago Bears. It's embarrassing. Matt Nagy should be fired. I want to publicly apologize for defending Matt Nagy on this podcast in the preseason and telling people that I like the Bears team total wins over, which I still have a ticket on, which is miserable. But yeah, Matt Nagy's an idiot. He had Justin Fields run the Andy Dalton offense. They didn't let him roll out for the first 2.5 quarters of the game. He still only ended up with 12 rushing yards. This is a guy who ran what you would know better than me. A 4.45. Am I in the right area there?
Yeah, something like that. So 30 dropbacks, 2 designed rollouts, 4 pre-snap motion, and he's sacked 9 times. You're not using his athletic ability to get out from behind that awful offensive line. Justin Tucker kicked a field goal that was longer than all of the Bears' offensive yardage for the day. So, Matt Nagy should have been gone yesterday.
Seriously.
Just unbelievable incompetence there.
Also, I will just say, and maybe it has more to do with the Bears and Nagy and whatever. Brown's defense is legit. JOK got I believe a 93.9 overall grade. I don't know what we could use with a guy like that on the Eagles. Just too small, Can't play linebacker or safety for us. We have too many studs at the position, so no chance we could have drafted a guy like JOK, who I had in my top 10, by the way, who we had a chance to take in the second round. Just absolute misery. But they obviously already have Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. You add a guy like JOK and what I think he already is and what I think he can be going forward. It's downright scary. That Browns team is a legit Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, he's elite, and he should have been an Eagle. Moving on to Detroit. The Ravens at the Lions. I don't know what to make of the Ravens this year. They needed a fumble by Clyde Edwards-Helaire to beat the Chiefs. Then they needed a 4th and 19 conversion and a 66-yard field goal to beat the Lions. I mean, so far this year, their week 1 game was decided on the last play. Their week 2 game was decided on the second to last play, and their week 3 game was decided on the last play. Lamar desperately needs help at wide receiver. Marquise Brown has been horrible. Bateman's obviously hurt. Right now, Lamar Jackson leads the league in both yards per carry and yards per completion. He is literally doing it entirely by himself on the offense. And then just a shout out to Justin Tucker, man, 66-yard field goal. He is now 16 of 16 on field goals in the final minute of a game in his career. And ironically, the last time he played the Lions in Detroit, he hit a game winner from 61. So the Lions have gotten sick of this guy.
Wow, yeah, he's the GOAT. He's the absolute GOAT, Justin Tucker. He's so Mariano Rivera, I always say, is the best closer in baseball by such a wide margin that it almost makes him maybe in conversations for the best player in the sports history. Mm-hmm. Justin Tucker is so by far the best kicker I've ever seen. And so by far, I'm more confident when he steps up to make a kick than anyone else I've ever seen, even Vinatieri. But yeah, I would say that the Ravens are 2-1 right now. They should be 1-2. But the funny thing about it is they should have won the game they lost, and they probably should have lost the 2 they won. So it's kind of bizarre. They had no business losing that game to the Raiders. The Raiders had a crazy comeback to force overtime and win. And then, they definitely should have lost to the Chiefs if Clyde doesn't fumble, like you mentioned. And then they definitely should have lost if Justin Tucker wasn't superhuman yesterday. So I think we'll find out a lot about the Ravens this upcoming week going into Denver. We'll find out a lot about both of those teams. I think that's kind of a big game. I'm going to be big in on the Ravens just due to simply the fact that I think Lamar Jackson, is pretty good at football. But I mean, it's hard to argue that receivers. The receivers for the Ravens is a bigger issue than any other contender has at a position group by an absolute long shot, in my opinion.
The Ravens might be the one team in the NFL that would take the Eagles if they offered to trade wide receiver cores.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
All right, rolling on to Jacksonville, the Cardinals at the Jags. This game is why I don't trust the Cardinals. This game should not have been close, and they were down 19-10 in the third quarter. Kyler Murray comes back down to earth a little bit. Trevor Lawrence, he's looking better every week. He's got a long ways to go. He's one of those guys that's tough to evaluate in just the cesspool that is Jacksonville. But the highlight of this game is the 109-yard field goal return for a touchdown right before half by Jamal Agnew. Obviously, that ties the longest touchdown in NFL history. But yeah, that was kind of a wild game. Not one I expected to be that close.
No, I didn't pay too much attention to this game. It wasn't a game I bet or was keeping close tabs on. But I would just say, it might not be fair to come down too hard on Arizona for being down 19-10 because the one touchdown was a 109-yard kick return. So if that kick return doesn't happen, then it would have been a bit more of a blowout. But obviously, that's a big if. But I'm not sitting here telling you that Arizona is a Super Bowl contender or anything like that. I still think that they probably come in third in that division, but maybe fourth. But I think it's probably third with how Seattle has looked, especially last week, which we'll get to. But yeah, Arizona is not a Super Bowl contender, but I think they could definitely sneak into the back end of the playoffs as a wild card. I don't know. Who knows what to make of them? Kyler Murray makes like 4 plays I can't believe I've seen every single week, and then makes about 1 or 2 throws where I'm like, what are you thinking? Like, what are you looking at? Can you just not see over the O-line? Like, he has 1 pick a game where it's like, wow, do you have money on the other team? Like,
maybe so. So got a blackball situation here. You heard it first on Chalk Talk. So then we go to another shocking game. We've got the Chargers at the Chiefs. So at Arrowhead, and the Chargers walk out of here with the win. And so what's interesting to me here, the question is, how do you stop both Kelsey and Hill? Like, if a team has one elite weapon, you can double them. You can't double both of these guys. And so enter Derwin James, and you don't have to. Derwin James can erase any tight end in the league, and he did. He erased Travis Kelce, and so you bracketed Tyreek Hill, and you really slowed down this offense. Now, it came down to, ultimately the Chargers, they line up to go for it on a 4th and 4 instead of kicking the field goal, just like the Ravens did, because they don't want to give the ball back to Mahomes. And they're late getting it out. They take the delay game, and they still decide to go for it on 4th and 9, which is gutsy. You got that time to think about it. Now, the play they drew up, a back shoulder throw to a guy named Jalen Guyton, who had 28 receptions last year. That's a gutsy play call. Not sure that's what I would have done, but it works out. And the Chargers end up winning this game. And to me, the real concern here is the Kansas City defense. They've got the worst scoring D in the game right now, and they've allowed a touchdown on 92% of all red zone trips. And so, at a certain point, I don't know how much you can expect Mahomes to carry a defense that's just going to be this bad. They're going to have to win in a shootout every week.
Yeah, I have a bit of a different take on this game, I guess. I would look at it and say Justin Herbert played like a perfect game.
Mm-hmm.
They had everything go right. The end of that, like you just mentioned, ballsy play calling by the name is Joe Lombardi, actually, not the head coach. Brandon Staley's the head coach. He probably wasn't playing play calling, but just absolutely ballsy. But everything went perfect. Herbert played great. Huge day from Eckler. Huge day from Keenan Allen. Huge day from Mike Williams. Jalen Guyton, by the way, a guy I really like. Every time I saw him last year, I was always like, wow, this Jalen Guyton guy, really impressive. Kind of similar to Kendrick Bourne in San Fran. I always have like these low-key receivers that I like. But the Chargers played perfectly. Mahomes played one of the worst games I've ever seen him play. I don't know what the numbers really ended up for him, but just eye test wise, he played one of the most inefficient games I've ever seen him play. Bad decision making, and I'm someone who thinks he's like the best I've ever seen. So I thought he played poorly. This game was, and like you said, they did a great job on Kelsey and Hill, and this game was still a 1-possession game down to the wire, pretty close. If the Chargers kick a field goal there, KC probably goes down and ties it up, and we might be talking about a different game because once it gets to overtime, who knows? So my takeaway is that you still need to play a perfect game to beat KC. It just so happens that it's happened 2 weeks in a row. KC hasn't played up to snuff in either game, and they've still had an absolute rock-solid chance to win both. So I'm not freaking out about Kansas City. I still think that they're probably the most likely team to win the AFC.
Oh, yeah, no doubt on that. But they've definitely stumbled a little bit out of the gate here.
Defense is definitely concerning. I didn't touch on that. Agreed.
Yeah. So New Orleans Saints at New England Patriots. Mac Jones looking like what a lot of people thought Mac Jones was going to be. He throws 3 picks. He looked totally lost trying to push the ball downfield against a pretty good Saints defense. And Jameis Winston, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, Jameis Winston played in such a way that when the Saints needed to close out this game, they deployed Taysom Hill heavily in the run game because their offense was just struggling. So I don't really know what to make of either of these teams, but it was a game, and it happened, and I guess it was entertaining.
No, yeah, I'm in the same boat. I would just say that Sean Payton's a genius and won this game on coaching alone. And Belichick and McDaniels either, I mean, you got to let Mac loose. Like they are, he threw 3 picks, so I guess they let him loose a little bit. I think 2 of those picks, I think one was a tip pick, and I think one was either like a Hail Mary at the end of the game or a Hail Mary at halftime, I believe. So I believe only really one of those picks was on Mac, but he has not been good. He hasn't, and I feel like Patriots fans and a lot of the Boston media mafia is what I like to call them, because it seems like every podcast has one Patriots fan on it from a national media standpoint. And they've all been trying to say how good Mac Jones has been. And you watch it, and it's just not the case. I mean, he's making really easy throws when he is making throws, and they're not asking him to do anything outside of his comfort zone. So, yeah, I mean, I have not been impressed whatsoever by Mac, and it's kind of been, like you said, exactly what we expected coming into the draft. This is a guy I didn't have as a first-round quarterback prospect, so it's not shocking to me, that he hasn't been very good. But it is a little bit shocking to me that Bill and McDaniels would go all in on him, draft him, cut Cam, start him week 1, and really not show any signs of faith in him.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably an element of you try to protect the guy and kind of ease him in, but when they tried to open it up a little bit this week, you definitely saw him really struggle. So
for sure.
All right, rolling on, we have the Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans. Mark, do you remember on our Week 1 review show when we talked about concerns about Derrick Henry regression?
Yeah,
well, that is a distant memory, my friend. He had 113 yards on the ground, and he has a franchise high rushing total through 3 games with 353 yards. So week 1, as bad as it was, he's been dominant the last 2 weeks. And then for the Colts, I mean, it's just more of the same. Wentz was pressured 18 times. His mobility was gone, obviously, with those ankle sprains. He took a lot of hits. In his last 8 starts across the Eagles and the Colts, Wentz has failed to put up 17 points on offense. And so
wow.
he looks lost. And I mean, to be honest, this is what we were concerned about with him. As soon as he went down in preseason, we were concerned about chemistry, we were concerned about mobility, and we were concerned about, his weapons. And all 3 of those have come to fruition. And, I really do hate it, because I wanted to see what Carson Wentz was real. And maybe we are seeing that. I don't know. Maybe we've hit the point where you can clearly see all the problems with your ex that you missed while you were dating. Maybe that's where we're at. But, I really did think he was a better player than this. And I'm still not convinced he's not, but he's not going to show it this year with the situation he's in.
Yeah. I think we're seeing what he is at this point and what his body is allowing him to be, really. And it's a shame. You're right. I definitely wanted to see if it was what he actually was and what the actual problems were, but I just don't think he's the same guy that he was at one point. The Titans are going to run away with this division. The Titans are going to win this division by 5-6 games. I don't know if go ahead.
I was going to say, I really feel like Carson Wentz is going to become the next Sam Bradford for me, a guy that I think had a lot of talent and just totally derailed by injuries and dysfunction on his football team. I mean, Bradford coming out, I thought he had a lot of talent, and then he went through all of the coordinator changes. And I think he had a different guy 3 of his first 4 years. He had all the injuries. I kind of feel like it's the same track for Wentz, a guy that we saw. And don't get me wrong, Wentz showed far more talent in 2017 than Bradford ever did in the NFL. But Bradford was in Rookie of the Year discussions his rookie year. So I just kind of feel like it's that same thing. He's been jostled around so much and hurt so much that it's never going to work out for him.
I'm biased here because Sam Bradford, this is going to surprise you and it's going to upset you as an OU guy. But Sam Bradford is my least favorite Philadelphia athlete of all time. And it goes back to that was one of the first drafts I ever really cared about, as a kid. And I just did not see it with Sam Bradford. The no deep ball, no mobility, constant worries about I guess the injury stuff was later, but and this is just not very, I was a kid or younger when Sam Bradford was really developing. He just never seemed to me like the guy I'd want in the huddle, to believe in, and the sleeves and the shoulder pads and the lack of sleeves. Oh, it drove me insane. The lack of throwing the ball over 5 yards, the breaking the completion percentage records. Oh my God. It used to drive me so insane. I can't stand Sam Bradford. So I had to unleash that. I was never a Bradford guy. I think he got saved at Oklahoma by incredible Oklahoma teams of that era.
It's fair. I'd be interested to go back and watch him now with the scouting knowledge I've built. Because, I mean, I was a kid when he was at OU, and I was an OU fan, so I definitely loved him as a fan, not as an analyst. So I'd be interested to go back and evaluate him now, but not interested enough to actually do it, probably. Let's keep rolling along here, though. The Washington football team at the Buffalo Bills. And, Mark, we just see it week in and week out. Washington's secondary is just abysmal. And the biggest thing for me in this game, looking at it from Buffalo's standpoint, is Josh Allen. I know the defense was bad, but he was 12 of 17 on passes over 10 yards, and his deep accuracy had been a huge struggle the first 2 weeks. So it's got to feel like a get-right game for Allen, not against the best competition, but, I mean, even if the throws are open, you still got to step up and make them, and Allen did in this game.
It also seems like they have, seriously found something in Zach Moss. It's taken them a long time to develop a running game. They have not had one really whatsoever during this whole run of the last couple of years. And it seems like in the passing game, Zach Moss has become a factor, and it seems like he's been a reliable option in the running game as well. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for them going forward. And that was kind of a huge concern I had with Buffalo. So that'll be something I kind of keep an eye out going forward is Zach Moss. But yeah, I mean, this is just your weekly check-in for the Heineke Hive out there. I know hey man, it's not always going to be easy as a member of the Heineke Hive, but he didn't look that bad. He didn't play that bad in the game. It was a blowout from just from Jump Street. Logan Thomas fumbles it in the red zone. I didn't think Heineke was that bad. I think Fitzpatrick
he was 14 of 24 and he threw 2 picks. That's pretty bad.
The one pick wasn't his fault, but the one pick was. He seems to throw 1 pick a week. That's very bad. But my point is just that, I think he's like somewhere between the 25th to 30th best quarterback in football. And I don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick is. But yeah, he's never going to be a high completion percentage guy.
Ryan Fitzpatrick is somewhere between like a top 2 quarterback and the like number 35 quarterback, but there's no in between. It's like,
yeah, I would take Heineke. I feel like I know what I'm going to get from Heineke. I don't think they've used his mobility quite enough, and that's just my complaint with every mobile quarterback ever, you'll notice. But I don't think they've used his mobility quite enough. If you watch the game, like, I thought he was fine. Like, I don't know.
You know what they should do when Fitzpatrick's healthy again? They should start Fitzpatrick in the first play of the game, let him throw a 9-ball, and if the receiver comes down with the catch, it's a Fitzpatrick game, and if it's not, he's off, and just go to Heineke. Just give him that first play, see if he's the number 1 quarterback or 35 that day, and then just roll from there.
I don't even think it's 35. I think it's like number 1 or like number 75. Like he is so bad sometimes, but I still think, Heineke makes plays. That team still believes in him when you watch them like on offense. But they didn't even – I mean, they were down like 21-7 in this game before you could even blink. Like that – this secondary is just absolutely terrible. They're on pace to have like some of the worst passing defensive numbers of all time in terms of for the rest of the season. Now, I know it's 18 games. Matthew Berry was complaining about it, but it's crazy. I mean, they're not getting any pass rush, and part of that is because how bad their DBs are and how open receivers are getting, but – it is just, I mean, are we getting to a point where it's like, I'm not saying that like you fire Ron Rivera because the team isn't good enough in his second year, but because he's a defensive guy and because his identity is so based in turning around whatever defense he's involved in, is this a situation where if Washington goes 5-11, 6-10, or whatever, 5-12, 6-11, and the defense doesn't fix itself and the secondary sucks for the rest of the year, is Rivera going to get fired?
I don't know. I feel like Rivera is the least of their problems, but
I'm not blaming him. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he won't, because I think he brings some respectability to Washington that they just haven't had in a long time. And so I don't think he gets fired, but it'd be something interesting to watch as we go, because I know they think of their defense is really good, and we all did too. But
it's just so shocking. That's why I do think it could be a thing. Like if it was the offense just sucking, I mean, you don't fire Rivera, but this is just, I mean, it's weird. It's no one expected this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's roll on to the Atlanta Falcons at the New York Giants. And Mark, you lead us off here because my cat snuck in and keeps meowing, so I'm going to throw it out of my office. So you go ahead. I'll be right back.
This was a big win for me. I was all over the Atlanta Falcons +3 and money line in this game. When the Giants went up 14-7, 5 minutes or so left in the game, it really seemed like that was a bet that was not going to hit, and it seemed like that was going to be a Giants win. But the Giants are going to Giants. I mean, they just find ways to lose games. And, Daniel Jones had his greatest game ever, whatever you want to say, in week 2. His stats looked pretty good in week 3, but they scored 14 points for a reason. You watch that game, there's a lot of the time where they don't move the ball and they waste opportunities. And Daniel Jones is still not the guy. And the Giants are going to be really bad. They're 0-3 at this point, and they have the hardest schedule in the league remaining for the rest of the way. So it's going to be a dark year for the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, part of that reason is they spent a number 2 overall pick on a guy and got 51 yards rushing out of him too.
He's done.
Yeah, I mean, so and big disaster strikes for them too. Blake Martinez is out for the year with an ACL injury, and I mean he's a very solid linebacker. I'm not going to say he's a great linebacker, in terms of that elite playmaker, but he is a very, very solid player. And I don't mean that as a negative. I like Blake Martinez a lot. But on the Falcons side of the ball, Kyle Pitts, I talked about this in the lead up to the draft. Rookie tight ends often struggle in that transition to the NFL. Well, through 3 weeks, he has 139 receiving yards, and he's played the Eagles defense, who have no linebackers, the Bucks, who have a terrible pass defense, and the Giants.
He did well against the Bucks. He had a good game against the Bucks.
And he's got 139 total yards. So that doesn't bode well for them, especially, spending that number 4 pick that they could have spent on a quarterback that they're going to need, in the next year or two. So not looking good so far.
Yeah, I'm still so bullish on Kyle Pitts, and I think he's going to figure it out. It hasn't been good, and Arthur Smith has not done a good job using him, and he hasn't split him out wide enough. And which is surprising
to me because he utilized Jonnu Smith so well.
Yeah, I've been really underwhelmed by Arthur Smith in general.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned about Kyle Pitts, the player, but more so that the draft capital that was spent on him. I just don't think it was a good investment for where the Falcons are at. But
I totally get that, and I've said many times I don't think Matt Ryan will ever quarterback a team with a winning record again. This win did not tell you anything positive about the Atlanta Falcons. This is not a win you walk away feeling good about. Like, they did not play well. This is a win that you walk away feeling terrible about the New York Giants. The fact that they found a way to lose this game is more impressive than anything on the Falcons side of the ball.
Yeah. So rolling on to 2 other teams that I have quibbles with how they spent their draft capital. We've got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben is just washed, man. He targeted Najee Harris 19 times in this game. Like, that is unbelievable that you would target a running back 19 times in the passing game. He just doesn't have it anymore. It was clear to anybody watching him last year at the end of the year as they faded down the stretch that he just doesn't have the ability to push the ball downfield. He's that style of quarterback, that big guy that takes a lot of hits, and it was always going to impact his longevity. And he's had a great career, but it was time to cut the ties, not take a running back in the first round and try to run it back. And then on the defensive side of the ball, TJ Watt was out, and without him, they couldn't get pressure. They had 1 pressure on the day against what is a very poor offensive line, which surprised me because you think of them as having this great defensive front, but with Watt gone, they just couldn't generate pressure.
Yeah, I mean, even if they weren't going to draft a quarterback, they should have been looking at guys like Teddy, Tyrod, Minshew.
Right.
They should have been looking at guys that, if you're the Steelers right now, you don't really have much of an option. Like, what are you going to bench Ben and put in Dwayne Haskins? Like, you don't have that option to fall back on. So it would have been huge for them to go get at least an option, but they just don't have it. And it's a shame because so many areas on this team are ready to compete. I mean, they have a ton of injuries right now, like you mentioned with TJ, Deontay Johnson's hurt, Juju's hurt. So there's their receiver trio, which is one of the biggest parts of their team. 2/3 of them are down right now. So, yeah, I mean, anytime you draft a running back in the first round and then a tight end who really has no hope in ever catching more than 50 balls, in the second round and a blocking tight end, basically, in Pat Freiermuth. I mean, it's pathetic. It's terrible drafting. The Steelers, I think we may look at that. I think this is stealing from Bill Simmons a little bit in his podcast, but every year there's a week 1 game that kind of throws people off the scent and kind of messes up our thoughts. And one team blows out another team, and we think that one team's good because of it and one team's bad because of it. That Steelers-Bills game from week 1 in Buffalo, where the Steelers won 23-10 or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a weird one. That's one we're going to look back on and be like, like what the hell happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you see that too, like the Saints. What in the world were the Saints week 1? What were the Eagles week 1? You just get crazy outcomes week 1.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so the New York Jets at the Denver Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater, he continues to manage games. He doesn't turn the ball over. He was 19 of 25 for 235 yards. He doesn't throw a touchdown, but he doesn't need to. He looks worth every bit of the 6th-round pick the Broncos gave up for him. I mean, what a steal that a lot of teams should have made. And as for the Jets, Zach Wilson tosses 2 picks. He takes 5 sacks. The Jets have got to get Wilson out of there. I mean, they're going to ruin him. He's taken 15 sacks through 3 games. He's been hit more than any quarterback in NFL history in his first 3 games. I mean, you and I talked about Wilson in the draft lead up. We were both lower on him than any of the other Big 4 quarterbacks. I think we both had him ahead of Mac. But regardless, I mean, you put any of the quarterbacks in this situation with the Jets, they're going to get blasted. And, you talk about when do you start a guy versus when do you sit him. You got to know that player and what being under pressure is going to do to them. And for a guy that, I mean, you've got no hope here. All you're going to start to do is ingrain these bad habits. You're going to speed that internal clock up. And I mean, in all honesty, the best thing the Jets could do for Zach Wilson, in my opinion, is get him out of the starting lineup. And that sucks. It wastes a year, but you're going to ruin this guy if you don't do something.
Just first off, a stat I want to get off the top of my head. Denver's the first 3-0 team ever to beat, I believe, 3 teams that are 0-9 combined. And the Raiders are just another stat off the top of my head. The Raiders are the first 3-0 team to beat 3 teams who won 10 or more games the previous year. So Raiders and Broncos, maybe necessarily 3-0 teams aren't, made the same. But I don't necessarily know if we know what the Broncos are yet. But I do know that we know what the Jets are, and the Jets are the worst team in football. The Jets are an absolute mess. And Zach Wilson's a big part of it. I mean, it's not like in spite of Zach Wilson and Zach Wilson's performing in spite of the Jets. Zach Wilson's terrible. I mean, Zach Wilson is as bad as I've ever seen really an NFL quarterback be. And you can point at the O-line and you can point at all these things. Joe Douglas needs to be fired at this point. Like, I'm at that point saying, like, you need to be fired. You have not done enough in your 3 years here. This is year 3. The O-line is still an atrocity. The defense is still not very good. I mean, the weapons for Zach Wilson are not Corey Davis is hurt. And now you have absolutely nothing. There's not much to be said. Denzel Mims, the guy that I really like, the guy that they drafted in the second round, is getting scratched, is getting healthy and active because they're saying if he's not going to start at receiver, he needs to play special teams. They're keeping guys like Braxton Berrios, and I think there's a guy named Fred Smith or something that I've literally never heard of that are getting active over Denzel Mims, who they took with a top 40 pick.
They can send Mims to Philadelphia. I'll send
him
Jalen Reagor.
I was actually much higher on Mims than Reagor. I had Mims receiver 5 or receiver. I think I might have even had him over Jefferson at Old Takes Exposed. I really liked Mims, so I'm biased here, but I think that's crazy what they're doing with him. I just don't know what the Jets are doing as an organization. And I actually don't have a hard stance on what you were saying, if they should take Wilson out. I get what you're saying, and it makes a ton of sense, but it also is just he's got to figure it out. He's got to, and not that he's going to be good. He's not going to be good around with that surroundings, but he can't just get shut out every week and throw 2 to 4 picks every week. And you are throwing him to the wolves, and maybe you are ruining him, but I feel like if you take him out, that might ruin him too. You're in a lose-lose situation with him at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those calls that we can't honestly make from the outside because you've got to know that player, and that varies player to player. But it's definitely something you should at least consider.
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. It's a train wreck.
Let's roll on. We got 4 games left here. The Miami Dolphins at the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm about to lay a take on you, and you're not going to like it. But Miami is a good team with a bad quarterback. It's the second year in a row that the offense has looked better with the backup than they have with Tua. And I know you're a Tua guy.
The offense looked better in that game?
I'm starting to have major question marks about Tua. I mean, Brissett wasn't – I mean, he wasn't great by any means, but he was fine. Raiders pressured him on 35% of his snaps. I mean, he completes a high percentage of his passes. He doesn't turn the ball over. And I mean, obviously, he doesn't throw a touchdown, but they scored 28 points. I don't know. I just
there was a pick six in there, and there was also a short field touchdown where they got the ball in like the 20. But yeah, if you take out the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game, and you take out the last 5 minutes of this game, and you watch the 45 minutes in between, this was not an offense that had any positives to take away. But they started the game hot. They had a really good first drive. They got a turnover. They scored on a short field. They get a pick six, and then besides that, they did nothing for 40 minutes. And then I will say Brissett looked fantastic at the end of the game, running the 2-minute drill, getting them to overtime. He looked fantastic. Besides that, I think that's I disagree.
He's one of those guys that, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying he's a starting caliber guy, but you give him reps over an extended period of time, he could maybe be a game manager for you. Not that that's the goal, but I was interested by how Brissett played. I didn't expect him to play in those spurts as well as he did.
Yeah, I think he's a solid backup, but I think that middle, that second, third quarter and the start of the fourth quarter were really dreadful. And there were even some plays where it was kind of shocking that the Raiders didn't pick off some throws. And there was just like a lot of tomfoolery in that game where it felt like the Raiders could have blown them out, and it just didn't happen. And it's mainly because of that hot start that the Dolphins got out to, getting up 14-0 right away. And then, I mean, that safety that the Jacoby Brissett, the Jalen Waddle safety, one of the dumbest plays I've seen in my life. Like, he threw it, like he was standing at the goal line and he threw it like 4 yards backwards. Like, I actually think it might have been a safety if it missed Waddle. Like, if it just went past Waddle, it might have been like a backwards pass, but that was crazy. And that really started like a long run of incompetence. But yeah, it was shocking how good, like watching that game start to finish and seeing how terrible it was for the middle, and then seeing what Brissett like snapped his fingers and turned into at the end of the game was shocking. Like, I was floored. But my main takeaway from this game is just that Derek Carr is the MVP right now. Yeah. Derek Carr is the MVP. This is unbelievable what he's doing.
He's on an MVP pace, and the biggest question for me is, can the Raiders defense keep up with because they're not blitzing much, but they had pressure on 35% of the snaps, and they've been like that the first few weeks. I'm not sure they can sustain that pace, but I'm interested to see how they can play once that D-line kind of cools off a little bit.
Yeah, and I think this has kind of been the Raiders' MO. Their defense overperforms in the early part of the season and the early stretch of the season, and they win games. Obviously, I don't think they've been 3-0, but they've had early season success for sure. And then they fade down the stretch, whether that be a team kind of stopping, listening to Gruden, or the defense kind of actually playing to their heads instead of above their heads, which they probably are right now, and they've done early season in the past. So that's the test. I do think they have a new DC. It's not Gus Bradley. Is it Gus Bradley? Who's the guy in Dallas right now as DC? Dan Quinn. It's Gus. I always get Dan Quinn and Gus Bradley mixed up. They were Seattle DCs like right after each other. Gus Bradley's the Vegas DC. He's a new guy there, so hopefully for their sake, he kind of can maintain this throughout the year instead of what's happened the last couple of years.
Yeah. Okay, rolling on 3 games left here. The Seattle Seahawks at the Minnesota Vikings. I don't have much to say in this game except thank you, Seahawks, for scoring 17 points in the first 18 minutes of the game and then getting shut out and blowing my over 28.5 bet. They get off to a fast start, just like I said they needed to. and then they just got blanked in the second half. So pretty embarrassing for Seattle. No idea what to make of them right now.
Yeah, no idea at all what to make of them. I had Seahawks money line. I was really confident they'd win this game. Kirk Cousins made their defense just look atrocious. Their defense couldn't tackle at all. This is a game Minnesota played without their star running back and Dalvin Cook. I know running backs aren't all that important, but Dalvin Cook is one of the elite running backs. So you do have to think that his absence would have made a negative impact, and they just chugged right along. And Kirk Cousins this was the best game I've seen Kirk Cousins play eye test wise in a long time. I don't know how the numbers ended up for Cousins, and he's had a ton of great games, but he was pretty much perfect in this game.
Yeah. And then our potential NFC title game preview, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Los Angeles Rams. And Tampa Bay comes up with the L. They've got the sixth worst scoring defense in the league right now. And some of the teams below them are the Lions, Falcons, Washington, and the Jags, teams that are just absolutely terrible. And so Tampa Bay's defense is becoming a real problem. And this time the offense just couldn't bail them out. And the question I have about Tampa is how long can they exist with just no running attack whatsoever? I mean, Tom Brady's the oldest guy in the league, and he leads the league in passing attempts through 3 weeks. I just don't know how long they can sustain that.
Yeah, their running game is definitely an absolute problem, and it's definitely going to be something that's interesting. Fournette obviously kind of picked them up in the playoffs, but a big reason that this team, I believe, was 6-5 at one point last year after a loss to the Bears at home. This was a team that was struggling, and a big part of that was not being able to run the ball. So if they're not able to kind of fix that problem and able to run the ball, then that's going to be something that continues to be a problem. I'm trying to see. Yeah, actually, Brady didn't turn the ball over in this game, but Brady did not look great in this game. And this is just like a reminder to people. And I know that people are going to kill me for this because everyone that just doesn't say everything positive about Brady gets killed. But Brady threw 6 picks in the conference championship in the divisional round to get to the Super Bowl last year. This was a team that kind of won in spite of Tom Brady in the second and third round to get to the Super Bowl. This is a team that is absolutely loaded in every way. And if this defense is a problem, I don't know if we're talking about just like a no doubt about it, set it and forget it Super Bowl contender anymore. I think we might be talking about the 11-5 team wild card that we talked about going into the playoffs last year that we didn't think was going to win the Super Bowl. So I don't know. This was a Rams team that I didn't even necessarily think Stafford played a perfect game. And I don't think Stafford has fit in perfectly with the system yet. And he's still balling out. I don't think they've reached what they're going to be. I think
no doubt. I mean, the offense is still a work in progress, and
100%.
But Stafford has 6 touchdowns on vertical routes this season, which matches what Goff did all of last year. Like, he opens up so much of this playbook for them that Goff just didn't. I mean, even that big touchdown to Deshaun a week ago, like, came on that double move. It was the dig and go. Well, you can't run that with Jared Goff because Jared Goff can't throw a dig. Matthew Stafford can make the throws, and I firmly believe that Sean McVay is still learning to trust that and to let him do it. And I think you're going to see this Rams offense become insanely good as the year goes on.
Which says a lot because they put up 34 in this game. They won 34-24, and the offense was great. And I still think it can get way better, and it can get way scarier, and it can get way more vertical. And I think that this is a passing game that you don't want to see and when it's humming in a couple weeks or in a couple months. And I think that I feel very, very good about my Rams-Browns Super Bowl pick with the Rams winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah. All right. And then moving on to the last game, the Sunday night game, we have Green Bay at the San Francisco 49ers. And Mark, it seems like all the primetime games, except for the Eagles Monday night game, of course, it seems like they're just incredible games. 37 seconds left with no timeouts, and the 49ers are ahead. Like, that should have been a win. And this is why you saw the Ravens go for it on 4th and 1 against the Chiefs. It's why the Chargers went for it against the Chiefs on 4th and 9. Because good quarterbacks, they just make plays happen. And Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers is able to get them down the field. Maybe some shaky defensive coverages here, but gets them down the field. They hit the 51-yard field goal, Mason Crosby, to win the game. And what I saw in this game is I saw Jimmy G. I saw the full, like, spread of what Jimmy G is. I saw him put the 49ers in a big hole. I saw him dig them out of it and carry them to the fringe of winning, and then they still lost the game. And just another side note here is that George Kittle has now not scored a touchdown since October 18th of last year. So
yeah, he's never had more than 5 in a season, Kittle. And then I believe you're absolutely right on Jimmy G. And it's a shame that people are going to completely forget. I think he took them down in like a minute and 30 seconds, maybe a minute 40 seconds to go down and take the lead. And that's a shame that that's going to just get completely wiped away. This was a game San Fran had no business being in, and a game that they had no business winning. And like you said, he brought them back and takes the lead there. I was very impressed with the second half performance from Jimmy G when around halftime I was starting to, and I'm not a Jimmy G hater whatsoever, and I was starting to think, maybe it's time for Trey Lance, and Jimmy G turns it right around as soon as you start thinking that. But yeah, too much time for Aaron Rodgers at the end of the game. Obviously, I'm an idiot. I tweeted out as soon as San Fran scored, I think I tweeted out Kyle Shanahan owns Matt LaFleur. And then I got so many immediate oh, how about now, idiot?
Yeah, hold on, I'm gonna go retweet that. Go ahead.
But I at Old Takes exposed myself. I will say Kyle Shanahan still does own Matt LaFleur. The fact that San Fran was in that game is crazy, but I think, yeah, I mean, these are two. You said the Tampa Bay LA matchup is an NFL. Jesus, it's late, folks. An NFC title game preview. So could Packers 49ers. That could be divisional. These are two teams that absolutely have Super Bowl aspirations.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to about wrap up our Week 3 review show. Coming to you a night later than usual, because obviously we weren't going to record during the Eagles game, although in hindsight, maybe we should have. Be sure you check out the Painted Lines. We have a lot of other content there. Dibes and I did a halftime show, Quick Thoughts. We did a live post-game show with Ty and with Rob. And so you can check all that stuff out to get our immediate reaction. If you want to see how my thoughts change from in the heat of the moment to having time to watch the tape later, that's a good resource for you. But Mark, before we get out of here, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go to the only team that's providing me any happiness since I always talk college football here in the final thoughts. Notre Dame with a big win. I told everyone to go take them against Wisconsin. So they now are back in the top 10. So I will just say I told everyone to take them against Wisconsin. I was very confident as a 6.5 point underdog. We have another huge game this week against Cincinnati. I believe we're a 2 point underdog. I won't be betting on Cincinnati, but if you're out there listening and you are not obligated to not cheer against Notre Dame, I would bet on Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's going to come into South Bend and blow the doors off of Notre Dame. They have a passing attack and Notre Dame cannot contain that because they have no one in their secondary that's worth anything outside of Kyle Hamilton. So yeah, that's going to be a problem. Wisconsin couldn't throw the ball, and that's why it was such a great matchup, and that's why I was so confident. So hopefully Notre Dame proves me wrong, but I think they will be adding just to another point of misery from the teams that I support.
All right. Well, for my final thought, I'm going to recommend a show to everyone out there. If you have Hulu, a show named Only Murders in the Building.
I'm watching this.
You've been watching it? Okay, so you guys should know how much I love you that I'm recording this podcast instead of watching the show right now. Fantastic show. I love true crime podcasts. And so my wife saw the trailer for the show, and we've been watching it. Love it. It's a story, about 3 people who are unlikely to be friends, but they come together over a true crime podcast and they begin to investigate a murder that happens in their building. And so I've loved it. I think tonight was episode 7 of 10. So go check that out, and you can drop your Only Murders in the Building takes at me on Twitter at _TPL over here, and we can chat. But only after I watch it tomorrow night. So don't at me with any spoilers.
Me and my girlfriend are only 3 or 4 episodes in. But yeah, Steve Martin and Martin Short are in it for anyone out there listening, and Selena Gomez is also in it. She loves Selena Gomez. I'm a big Steve Martin and Martin Short guy from their SNL days. So yeah, it's very funny. Very interesting. It's just a different show. I like it a lot.
Yeah, very well done. And I haven't seen a show that's like it. Just kind of its humor and how it tells the story. Really good show. So go check that out after, of course, you finish listening to all of our Chalk Talk episodes. So thank you guys, as always, for joining us for episode number 12 of Chalk Talk. Whether you are live, whether you're listening later, we do appreciate you. And if you enjoy what you're hearing, and we know you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handles are right here at @halfandhalf_TPL, at Mark Henry Jr. _. For me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.